Dear Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to have a presentation about epidemiological and experimental evidence for the hypothesis that environmental noise is a cause of hypertension. European Environment Agency published periodically the reports about noise in Europe. In such a report in 2014, the word hypertension was used 23 times. In the report in 2020, twice. And in the mentioned here during the symposium report in 2025, once only. In the report in 2014, the expert of European Environment Agency estimated the number of new cases of hypertension due to the action of environmental noise on 900,000 cases per year. In the report in the 2025, the percentage of European population living in the noise over the limit which is harmful to health was estimated on 20% for the use of European Noise Directive level, it is over 55 decibels, or on 30% when we use the WHO recommendation over 53 decibels. Among the impacts of environmental noise were listed annoyance, sleep disturbances, premature deaths, cardiovascular diseases, and what's new, type 2 diabetes cases. Hypertension was not listed. Hypertension was used once only on the feature adopted from the previous publication of our colleague Omar Hahat as one of the possible disturbances due to the noise in cardiovascular system. The question is, what happened? Is it possible that epidemiological data no longer indicate that hypertension is a negative health effect of environmental noise? In the meta-analysis performed for WHO by Elise van Kempen in 2018, each increase per 10 decibels in air traffic, road traffic, or road traffic noise increased the prevalence of hypertension by 5%. Because there were no sufficient data in cohort studies, there was no evidence for the incidence increased incidence of hypertension due to traffic noise. The European Environment Agency report in 2025 based mainly on a previous meta-analysis performed by European Environment Agency European Topic Center, which was published in 2023. This document for hypertension based mainly on the meta-analysis performed by Shivakumaran and co-workers and published in 2022. The situation for the all-cause mortality, for example, is such that each 10 decibel increase in road traffic noise increase all-cause mortality by 5.5%, and this is very important, at high certainty of evidence. This term, certainty of evidence, is a term from the system grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation. It is grade approach. I have not enough time to clarify how this system works, but I try to show you on examples. For example, if we look on the road traffic noise in the meta-analysis of Shivakumaran et al., as you see in cross-sectional studies, there is 10 decibel increase in road traffic noise, increase the risk of hypertension by 9%, but as you see, at very low certainty of evidence. Why low certainty of evidence? Because we are talking about the cross-sectional studies. There is also a big difference between cross-sectional and cohort or case control studies. As you see, in cohort and case control studies, road traffic noise may have only little to no effect on hypertension. But still, the evidence was very uncertain. How? I don't understand at the beginning, but I decided to look on the results of one of the biggest studies included in this meta-analysis. It is the study of Zip and co-workers. As you see, the study based on health insurance database for persons living near Frankfurt Airport. Different type of noise were analyzed. Cases, newly diagnosed hypertension cases, were defined based on diagnosis coded as ICD code I-10 at hospital discharge or twice at the ambulatory visits. How were defined the controls? Control subjects were all present in the database without any new or prevalent hypertension diagnosis as described above. Probably for the epidemiologist, there is the same, to have hypertension and to have diagnosed hypertension. We know from the World Organization report that also in Germany the number of undiagnosed hypertension is 28%. So among cases, near one third, has hypertension, despite were excluded. What about aircraft noise and hypertension? In cross-sectional studies, there was no strong evidence that air traffic noise is associated with hypertension. Once more, at very noise increase because there were cross-sectional studies. In cohort and case control studies, 10 decibels in air traffic noise may increase risk of hypertension by 10%, but still at low certainty of evidence. Definitely, for the railway noise, the increase in 10 decibels may have little to no effect on the risk of hypertension. The meta-analysis of Shivakumaran and co-workers analyzed also the influence of noise on the level of blood pressure. And here, there was a difference between the exposure below 60 decibels and over 60 decibels, below 1 millimeter of mercurium for systolic and diastolic blood pressure, as you see. But looking on these results, I found that 2 of 3 studies included in this meta-analysis were from our center. And at this point, I must say that our second study was the continuation of the first. Then we have the same individuals in both studies. Could it be considered as separate studies to calculate pooled effect? The second question is, we compared 2 levels of exposure below 55 and over 60, not below 60 and over 60. The next question is how Shivakumaran and co-workers transform differences given by us as mean and standard deviation into presented as median and confidence interval. And the last, but not the least, in the large epidemiological studies investigating aircraft noise influence on hypertension, what was really very surprising for me, blood pressure was not measured. And this is why our small studies were included in this meta-analysis. I still believe that so small studies as our studies have low certainty of evidence. But now I think the same about all the results of this meta-analysis. However, this meta-analysis is still the base for the recommendation of an European Environment Agency, environmental noise in Europe, about the influence of environmental noise on hypertension. 4 large studies were published after this meta-analysis, 2 in United States about aircraft noise, and 2 in Europe, 1 in France, and 1 in United Kingdom. The first American study analyzed the data of postmenopausal women and based on more than 18,000 cases, the conclusion is that there is no evidence supporting a positive relationship between hypertension incidence and aircraft noise. The main limitation of this study, however, is the age and sex of participants, because included were only postmenopausal women. Truly, it was not a study dedicated to analyze the influence of noise on blood pressure. The next study analyzed the data from 90 US airports, and in 20 years observation in nurses' health studies, including more than 116,000 female nurses, at the dichotomization of the level of exposure below and over 55 decibels, author found that there is marginally suggestive evidence of a positive association between aircraft noise and hypertension. The French study, the BAT study, was performed among the participants living near the three large French airports, and this is a relatively small study because there was only 1,244 participants. But what is of extremely importance, the data were collected during interview face-to-face, and at each visit and during follow-up, the blood pressure was measured. And in this study, the increase in hypertension incidence at each increase of an aircraft noise by 10 decibels was 36%. The study published based on a prospective analysis of UK biobank in JAG indicated that there is 13% increase in the incidence of hypertension at the between the two levels of exposure over 65 and below 55 decibels. So then, looking on the number of people estimated as exposed to road traffic noise over 55 decibels, and using the coefficients from the study published about road traffic noise in JAG, the number of new cases of hypertension per year should exceed 857,000 per year. Even if railway noise doesn't increase the number of new cases of hypertension, the number of exposed to aircraft noise, estimated by European Environment Agency as 2.6 million, and at the use of the coefficient from the debate study, the number of new cases of hypertension must be over 67,000 per year. So still the total number of new cases of hypertension per year should exceed 900,000 per year. About the experimental evidence. Probably the central rule in the mechanism linking noise exposure with cardiovascular diseases is increased activity of amygdala region, the part of the limbic region, where annoyance, which is the effect of noise action, is transformed into increases sympathetic nervous system activity, increase activity of the hypothalamic pituitary axis. Of course, increase in blood pressure and atherosclerotic inflammation leading to major adverse cardiovascular events. And we also have proofs from an experimental study performed in humans using positron emission tomography, where increased activity of amygdala region was associated with vascular inflammation and increased number of MACEs, major adverse cardiovascular events, during 5-year follow-up. In an animal study, the increase in blood pressure due to aircraft noise was associated with increased oxidative stress and decreased endothelial function, but was extremely important for me. There was no adaptation among animals to the aircraft noise. We have also field experimental human study among 75 healthy volunteers, increased number of noise episodes as was shown by Susanne, but this is the result of Schmidt and co-workers, lead to the increase in systolic blood pressure, arterial stiffness as measured by pulse transit time, increased activity of adrenaline, and decreased activity of flow-mediated dilation. The same group analyzing, the same group of authors analyzing another group of participants, it is 60 volunteers, but with Framingham score over 10, or people with ischemic heart disease, definitely showed that there is an increase in systolic blood pressure, statistically significant due to the aircraft noise exposure. In summary, there is epidemiological, in my opinion, and experimental evidence of the impact of environmental noise on the incidence of hypertension, despite the fact that hypertension has disappeared from European Environment Agency report on environmental noise in Europe. The reason is the low certainty of this evidence compared to cardiovascular mortality, ischemic heart disease, or even diabetes, for which such evidence is much more certain. Because the word certainty was very often used by me, I should use also the quoting from Voltaire. Uncertainty is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is an absurd, or maybe more optimistic, by Karl von Clausewitz. Although our intellect always longs for clarity and certainty, our nature often finds uncertainty fascinating. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajzer, for the excellent lecture.